and again, this does have to do with nationality. Let's have an honest conversation. There is such a broad spectrum of values, infinite values, and a lot of these values are completely, objectively incompatible with Western values that we adhere to in the United States. This brings us to an important macro discussion, okay? And I think that you kind of get people who simply, there's a lot of tokenism and there's a lot of gimmickry that goes on, sometimes on the right, in order to push back against the left. And so you have people not only talking past each other, but not even attempting to have a genuine conversation. You have people who say, hey, immigration has nothing to do with race or nationality. And then you have some people saying, hey, it is entirely due to the IQ of a race or nationality. I think most people understand, there have been a lot of immigrants in this country, but immigration of yore is not the same as immigration today. And a significant component to that is race and nationality. Comment below if you think I'm out of line before you allow me to make my case, because the left tries to use this as the jumping off point. Hey, it's all the same. We are, in general, a nation of immigrants, right?
We have to remain a nation of immigrants.
We are a nation of immigrants.
Jeez.
The only way we're going to have a great future in America is if we welcome and embrace immigrants.
We are all descendants of immigrants.
America is made stronger by the presence of immigrants, not walls.
So you can eat them?
Immigration has always been essential to America.
The American people, we're all immigrants.
We must acknowledge we are a nation of immigrants.
We are a country of immigrants. The reality is that immigrants have always been what made this country great.
So let me make the case. What kind of a nation of immigrants are we? By the way, not all of us are immigrants, to be clear. I don't know why they say that. They just lie.
Yeah, that's stupid.
It's a really dumb comment to make. Also, how are immigrants today different from immigrants before? Are all immigrants the same? Now, let me, of course, sort of lay the foundation here. I've talked about this quite a bit. The biggest difference is pre-welfare state versus post-welfare state, right? People were coming to this country a long time ago, no promises whatsoever. Hey, you now have access to the land of opportunity, but you risk it. You're risking it all yourself. Today, they come here with the promise of everything. So back in the day, pre-welfare state, people came here to risk, to be entrepreneurs. Today, they come to take. Very different dynamic. But let's go one step further. If we look at immigrants that they'll often point to, for the longest time, we shared most things in common. Similar languages, religion, technological innovation, rule of law and respect for it, history to some degree, cultural, social norms. We don't have any of those things in common with many groups of immigrants coming to this country right now. And it's time, we be honest about it, it's time for a little then and now. All right, let's take a journey to back then, okay? When people talk about their grandfather, their great-grandfather, immigrants had a lot of things in common, okay? Origins. For example, they were predominantly European, right? Irish, Italian, German, Polish. If you look at that, they also had language in common. Certainly the Irish, the English, and there were language similarities overall that allowed them to ease into English as the unifying language here in the United States. And at that point, American identity, since they were seeking the opportunity and fleeing and leaving behind these previous countries, which were much more similar, by the way, to our country and the countries from which modern immigrants are hailing, it was pretty easy for them all to assimilate. They were all in the same boat. I get it. People come from all different nations. I understand that the Irish and the Italian living in New York didn't speak the same language initially. But can we stop acting like they were from different planets? That it was even remotely comparable to what we are dealing with today? Let me give you an example, okay, right now. And I was supposed to get into this later, but today, Cuba, Haiti, right? Could throw a baseball from one to the other. Don't fact check that. You understand the point. Do they share?
Is that true?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. Well, you know, you share with right there, Dominican. I bet you one of them could probably launch one.
Yeah.
So language, Cubans, Haitians, nope. Religion, nope. Rule of law, nope. History, nope. Traditions, nope. Their moral code unwritten into a society that is required for it to function. Absolutely not. They share none of those things in common. So let's turn them and send them to another nation, the United States, where they also don't have those things in common. Do you see the difference? These people, previous generations of immigrants, they of course were seeking to take part in American identity, even, by the way, in times of war.
I like America. Betty Boop, what a dish. Betty Grable, nice scams. I say, can you see? I say, can you see? I say... Hitler.
Now, I will, full disclosure, that one didn't make it.
No.
Hey, was that Forrest Gump again?
Well, it's easy to make that mistake.
I did like the look on his face, though, right then when he knew, like, I'm going to die.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a dead man.
It's like, I bet on the wrong horse.
Yeah.
Goebbels. Now, this brings us to now compared to immigrants before. And I'm going to close this with pointing out something. This is all by design, right? Rather than a mosaic, rather than a melting pot, we're looking at multiculturalism. So today's immigrants, unbelievably varied origins, meaning we can't possibly be unified, meaning today's diversity couldn't possibly be our greatest strength. Africa, South America, the Middle East, Asia. What do those people share in common between their own nations, let alone ours? And they're all coming in at once? And by the way, multiculturalism, the religion of the left today, demands that their culture be preserved, as seen in the previous segment on Ilhan Omar, saying that Somalia is a great place, even though people are starving, have room temperature at best IQs, and many of them marry their brothers. Hey, how about abandoning that and appreciating the country that gave you this opportunity? To say that people coming from the Middle East, from Asia, from, let's say someone coming from, I don't know, El Salvador, someone coming from Syria, and someone coming from China, that is even remotely comparable to an Irishman, an Italian, an Englishman, and a German coming here in the 1920s, you're being intellectually dishonest. Now, you can argue it has nothing to do with race. I'm not saying it's melanin in the skin. I am saying, however, it does have to do with nationality. Now, of course, if I take you at your word, leftists, it would be race. La raza. You say it's race. I'm not saying it's race. I'm saying there's nothing in common and a society can't work. Let's go back to then. This is something very interesting. I asked research to see if there were numbers on this, and we found them. So immigrants before post-1980s, it's a very different mindset. They were better. What do I mean by that? Superior, better people, better citizens. Pre-1980, their proficiency in English was almost double what we see today. So if they were a high school grad, 58%. If they didn't even finish high school, they were still 21% is the number you're looking at as far as who was proficient in English. Back then, everyone wanted to learn it.
Hey, baby, what's happening? That's blue.
Today, this brings us to now. We went 58% of high school graduates who spoke English as immigrants. Today, that number's 25. We went 21%, those who didn't have a high school degree. Now that's 8%. How do we have fewer immigrants today when America is more prosperous than ever, learning the language? That's a proactive sign, a signal of a lack of respect and appreciation. Why? Because they've been told that they shouldn't respect and appreciate this nation. But they've been told to take.
Yeah, and assimilation is part of the problem. You said it's something disconcerting when you have a group of people move here and really want nothing to do with the culture at all and just kind of form their own community.
Yeah, well, they don't need to, right? That's the key. When you end up with such an overwhelming demographic of one group, in this case, Spanish speakers, what incentive do they have if they're in an area where everybody speaks Spanish to actually learn the language? They don't have any.
Right.
And so they end up having small micro nations inside the nation.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. That's the multicultural experiment going off the rails.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you look at the birth rates in the United States, the reason we have to import so many immigrants because we can't sustain our own nation. And so now what's happening, you're gonna have balkanization one way or the other. It just won't be the balkanization you thought.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It'll be balkanization of what we're seeing now, which is huge Hispanic enclaves, especially all over the South and Southwest. And then, far east, you go to like Miami. I went through Miami. Nobody spoke English.
Yeah.
It was bizarre.
Yeah.
It was like just nobody here speaks English at all.
But we turn a blind eye because of the mamis.
Can I tell you a secret? I don't speak Spanish.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
fool. I never learned. I only know like this and that.
There's a curveball.
I only know a few chingaderas, but I don't really speak the language. And to be honest with you, I feel uncomfortable in my own house.
Well, we all feel that way. That's not unique.
I feel uncomfortable with you in this house.
Yes.
I think it's time for them to assimilate.
Yes, exactly.
It's time for them to assimilate. What is it?
No, you'll get there. You'll get there. And that's a good point, too, Andrew. We used to have a word for those places. They're called ghettos.
Yeah.
They ghettoize places. And you have that, by the way, in certain areas, for example, Indian areas.
We call it the barrio.
Yes, exactly. I think so.
I don't know what it means, though.
Well, and how are you not ending up with basically a second surf class anyway, if the only reason that you're doing this mass importation of humanity is to keep your GDP high, rather than incentives to, sustain your own population,
right?
Which is the birth rate's declining so quickly that for places like South Korea, it's going to be extinction level. Right. I mean, you're talking about less than 1 per. The United States is right on track for that. So, the immigration crisis is way worse than people think.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And this is, again, all by design. It's been an anti-humanist agenda that has been pushed with the advent of not only birth control. And by the way, I'm not saying that you can't use a rubber at a truck stop. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you can purchase it at a truck stop. That's where I get all my rubbers. Just kidding. Rubbers. Condoms are for losers. Now. But it's true. With the advent of birth control, sexual liberation, and then an anti-humanist agenda here, because overpopulation is the problem. You have a nation here, by the way, a nation of entirely immigrants, if you hear Kamala Harris say it. Then you have people who come from nations who understand that actually more children, more family members leads to a greater chance of prosperity. It's more work hands, right? Also, a lot of these people have more traditional values, family values. That's one thing that can be argued. Certainly people from Muslim populations to varying degrees, and Hispanics with deeply rooted sort of Catholic origins. Let's go to the next one, actually. Let's go back to then. Immigrants. Again, we're a nation of immigrants. Okay, are they all the same? They had a common religion. Around 1900, 95% of Europeans who made up the bulk of immigrants, they were Christians. And they maybe weren't all the same denomination, but they shared Christian traditions. Again, they didn't come to this country in a dynamic where they were unable to understand. An Irishman here wasn't unable to understand why the Italian across the street was acting the way he did. There was a code of conduct. They did come from Christian traditions. This wasn't completely upending their way of life. They shared it in common, and they were happy to share it in common because if they didn't share language, that's what bonded them. Now, we don't have that at all. Many immigrants have different religions that, frankly, are incompatible with Western civilization, like, in many instances, Islam.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar wal izzatu lillah.
and a far cry from Christianity. Some would argue it's simply idolatry of self and practice secularism with a veneer of religion. Hinduism.
Men in Western India are smearing cow dung all over their arms, head, and entire bodies.
Well, we don't do that here.
Pinche cochino.
Yeah.
That's one of those words I know.
We don't do that here.
Ugh.
And by the way, for people who all eat, pray, their love across the East and eschew Western medicine, why does China look like China? Why does India look like India? You understand that a lot of these, we've talked about this before. People go, if I need a God, the edgy atheists, they go, if I need a God to tell me not to kill, then I just must be a horrible person. Okay, what about mercy? What about fidelity? These were not global values until modern Christianity. You guys you may take it for granted, but and by the way, even murder in some instances, certainly theft in many nations across the globe.
They can't account for any of those values absent stealing them from the Christian ethics that they were raised in. They can't account for any of them.
No.
And so this you make a good point. Stupid secularists make this argument all the time. Well, which Christian denomination? And it's like, well, when you have a shared set piece, so we have theological differences, argue over the theological differences. Well, we're not arguing over things like murder, theft, rape, age, things like this. We're not arguing about those things. They're universal for all of us. When you start introducing these other cultures, the universality goes out the window. We don't even have a starting place. Right. There's no place for the dialogue to even begin.
Right.
The set piece is so, it's so gone. Secularists also have the same problem. You think secularists agree? They don't agree on anything. They have so many different small groups of humanists and anti-humanists and anti-natalists, pro-natalists. and they're all secularists. What's their big agreeing foundation? They don't have one.
Right. No, you're absolutely. They try and act like, being a pre-tribulationist or a post-tribulationist, like that's a bigger difference than them believing in, legalized euthanasia, as we see in Canada. It's not even close. And by the
Or how about a triple grand slam gay marriage where they can adopt? Like, what's the secular argument against that? There isn't one.
Yeah.
But if you go to any Christian denomination, right, they're at least going to have some kind of base, unless you get like some of the crazies, like maybe the Mormons and whatnot. But for the most part, you're going to have some kind of like institutional level or ecclesiastical authority is going to be like, no, some kind of agreement there.
Yeah. I don't refer to it as gay adoption. I refer to it as two gay dudes buying a baby.
Theft.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a sitcom or a McConaughey film.
I know a guy that can get you a baby for pretty cheap.
No, I bet you do. Also,
And I think it was Jordan Peterson who said that it was the Europeans in the translation of the New Testament that kind of softened down the fear of God and helped people to realize that slavery was wrong.
Is it one of your babies from your fourth baby mama?
Fool, I don't even know that guy's name.
But that's a good point. Good point with I didn't. Peterson is very big in Mexico.
Hey, fool. Yeah. I'm from Chico.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That's right, Chico.
He's very big in Chico.
Hey,
also Sheboygan. Very big.
I got Audible from Amazon.
Yeah.
I can listen to a book so I don't have to read it.
Going back to the point that you made, it also has a huge effect on self-governance. For example, someone who believes, and you can say flying spaghetti monster, okay, fine. But someone who believes that there's an ultimate authority and that you are judged for what you do, and there is a judgment that exists autonomously from you, and that there's the concept of heaven and hell, of justice, of punishment, right? That's very different from someone who believes, well, I create my own nirvana or I create my own hell, as you see with some Eastern religions and Hinduism. This is what you see a lot in India. There's a reason. Look, this is not to single out India, but I'm going to for a second. Virtually all of the scams where they clear out old people's accounts and credit cards, those phone calls that you get, they come from one of two nations. India, sometimes Pakistan, Bangladesh, okay? But largely India. How do you get that as a business model exclusively from one nation? Well, let me tell you this. If you believed that the only consequences are how you feel, right? Well, you're not in nirvana, and you stole from an old person, and you now have a full bank account, and you feel okay?
Then you're okay.
That's as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
I feel great.
Well, you're talking about variance, which is great, right? So the idea of variance. So if Christians have a God and the God only has X amount of attributes, right? These are the attributes of God. This is universally agreed. You only have so many legs of logic you can go down from that, right? If it's just an individual who says, well, it's my own personal nirvana, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
Like there's no cap on those roads, right?
Yeah. And that's why it's okay for them to, grab a titty in the club.
Yeah.
They do it all the time.
If you're going to steal from an old lady, don't put that money in the bank, ese. Come on, you got to be smart about it. Put it in your mattress or in your walls. I learned that from the pastor Joel Osteen.
Yes, he does. He's a big wall banker. Let's go back to then, okay? Beyond just the religion, immigrants had common values, right? They had values where they balanced the value of individualism and the collective. Meaning, okay, we value individual freedoms to varying degrees. The United States, I would say, certainly place more emphasis on that than other nations. But we also understand that we have a duty to the collective, that we need to function as a society. You have that in all of these European nations. Work ethic. These would be considered certainly classical liberal values, certainly post-Enlightenment era. We can get into all that, but there's no arguing with the fact that the people in the 1900s, 1920s shared values. Now, immigrants from other nations, and again, this does have to do with nationality. Let's have an honest conversation. There is such a broad spectrum of values. It's broader than the spectrum of retards in 2025. It's endless. There are countless retards, infinite retards and infinite values. And a lot of these values are completely, objectively incompatible with Western values that we adhere to in the United States.
Wouldn't you say that...
Fed up with the armed gangs roaming their streets, residents of Port-au-Prince took justice into their own hands Tuesday.
How much for the tires?
Seeking to back up police, they clashed with suspected
Do you want the body with it or no?
Killing dozens and then setting their dead bodies on fire in the street.
Here, the road itself has become a drain, meaning the dirty water of the gutter has come on the road.
Gross.
That is why people have built the road here by putting wooden doors.
Poverty and economic disparity have long plagued Mexico,
Hey.
a nation with one of the highest income inequality levels in Latin America.
The trains don't stop here in Pacajuma. Public services are non-existent in this sprawling slum of 50,000 people, which borders Kinshasa's richest neighborhood.
Which is still poor.
He's riding like a burro.
They don't even know how to fake ride a horse.
At the edge of Lagos is the most insane floating water world called Makoko.
Welcome to Africa.
The largest floating slum in Nigeria and the Venice of Africa.
Dinero. Entre más dinero tiene, más gente compra, más gente trabaja.
One of your people, bro.
Tanto policía, políticos,
I don't recognize him.
Jueces, fiscales, abogados.
This cop right there, he's like, that's fine.
It's another Tuesday.
Hey, get down, lady.
Oh, you're still here? And you're still watching this on YouTube? You've probably noticed something is missing by now. I'm not here. That's because the Live Daily Show is now streaming exclusively on Rumble weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Tune in there, where nothing is censored.